Hi, welcome to Pace TV. My name is Angel Alvarez. Today we're talking about railroads. Trains have been a popular mode of transportation since the 19th century. The first person to come up with the idea for an engine and to use the steam technology of the day was a man named George Stephenson in Great Britain. When he came up with this idea and people realized that they might be traveling as fast as 25 miles an hour, they thought there was no way they'd be able to breathe or that the vibrations from the train would shake them unconscious. We bought the first steam engine here in the United States in about 1830, and by 1850, there was 9,000 miles or so of track east of the Mississippi River. By 1864, there were over 33,000 miles of track in the United States, most of it in the north. Now let's talk about the subject that we're really here for, and that's miniature railroads. There are some 500,000 miniature railroad enthusiasts in the United States and Canada. And here to help us understand the interest and all of the purchasing and all of the trains and all of the engines and cars and all of that is one of the railroad enthusiasts, our friend Jim Schwartz here in San Diego, California.
Good
Jim,
morning,
welcome.
Angel. Good morning.
Good morning to you. How did you get started in miniature railroading?
Well, when I first moved to California, I built a train set for a guy. In other words, I just built the layout. It had nothing to do with the trains. And he had seen an engine, a train set that I'd had as a kid. And he brought over to me a gifted, a 4x5 layout. I played with that on and off for several years. And in 2016, I decided, okay, I really want to build my own train layout.
And do you belong to any clubs?
I'm a member of the San Diego Model Railroad Association at its Balboa. There's 5 different clubs down there, 5 different train sizes down there. Garden trains, O-gauge trains, HO trains, and N-gauge. Now an O-gauge is 1/87th the size of a real train. The O-gauges are twice that size and the garden gauges are bigger than that. N-gauges are tiny. They're like so long and they're hard to work with. So that's why I stuck with the HO gauge.
Now, you mentioned that there are 5 clubs in Balboa.
Right.
And I've been down to the site that you're talking about. But do the different clubs then run different size HO or different gauges?
Right.
Or why are there 5 clubs? Why don't you all just belong to one club?
I guess it's when somebody decides they want to run trains, they have to say, well, what do I want to run? Do I want to do HO? Do I want to do O? So they make that decision, and then that group of guys says, okay, we're going to make that kind of a layout. So there's many clubs here and other locations, Oceanside, Santee, all have clubs. This just happens to be one of the larger, and our layout is one of the largest in the United States.
Okay, now I noticed in your setup that you have what was a replica of an old steam engine, plus you have a replica of an electric diesel. Mm-hmm. So do the clubs only run steam-looking engines, or do they only run electric, or can you run anything on any of the tracks that are obviously have to be HO
Right.
gauge like what you have?
So if I'm going to decide what I want to run, I'd say, well, do I want to do steam or do I want to do diesel? Most of us have both. The steams went away in the 50s, and it's been diesel electric since then. A diesel engine turns a generator to make electricity, which is kind of hard to understand. It's much more like a Tesla car, which has a motor for wheels, or for the power to the wheels, and that's what diesel electrics do. So they decide which way they want to go, diesel or steam. They're all electric in actuality. And then you kind of match your cars up with that era, if you will.
Oh, okay. So if you had a steam engine, then you wouldn't have something that would normally be pulled by an electric diesel. You would have more cars that look kind of like the era of the...
Yeah. For instance, until 1950, people walked across the top of cars in real action. So if you see one of the little cars that's got kind of a rail on the top of it, that means somebody was that's pre 50s. That's not so any of the cars that are modeled later. And remember that I can get a car that's modeled after 1930, or I can get a car that's modeled after 2010.
Okay.
Where do you want to go?
Okay.
Or how much money do you have?
Yeah, that would be one of the questions. Is the hobby expensive? I mean, I can remember we used to have a model train. We didn't last very long because we burned out the transformer, but and it was a used one, and we bought it real cheap. But can you spend like thousands of dollars? I mean, are we talking about like a lot of hobbies are, once you get into them and once you want to try and buy equipment that matches something that you're trying to accomplish or something you want to see, I mean, you can spend lots and lots of money.
Well, for sure. And if you were going to start, just say, I want to do a model train, probably $300-400. You could have the trains, the track, and a transformer to start. And then you'll end up somewhere along the line where you're paying $300 per engine, or maybe $20-some per car. So it kind of depends upon what do you have. I'm running with guys who have 80 engines. I have 11.
Wow.
But I'm new. I've only been doing this 6 years.
So you're a newbie.
I am a newbie, and every time I go down there, I learn something else.
What was your first train car? What was the first part of that you had? Did you have a whole set? Or did you start out?
No, it was February 14th, I believe, because my birthday was the next week, and we went to a swap meet at Del Mar, and my son bought me 4 cars for my birthday. Those were the first 4 cars that I bought, and then I bought a train set in I think April of 2016, and the train set that you'll see pictures of was probably pretty much built in a little over a year. That's unusual. I had 2 things. I had time and I had money.
It's always 2 good things to have, right?
Yeah.
Time and money. There's always time and money. When you decided to build the layout you have now, what was your thinking, or what were you trying to accomplish? Because there is some things there that replicate things that we had talked about before, that replicate things that you remember from the farm, from the small town that you grew up in. But is that what was your plan, or what was your idea for setting your layout the way it is?
I really wanted to replicate on my layout what it was that I remember from Minnesota in 1954. So I chose to put my farm on one end of my board and the city of Wadena on the other. Some of the buildings are very similar, some of them are not. But so I have a small layout, but I've been able to, you'll see the Studebaker Champion that I learned to drive on. You'll see the mobile truck that brought gas to the farm. Almost everything on there has some memory of the farm, and I keep thinking about other stuff. It's brought back more memories to me. And one of my friends sent me a Corvette. There was no Corvettes in Wadena, Minnesota, but it's on my layout. Why? Because that's what he gave me.
When you did the layout, or as you look at it now, and maybe you've already answered the question, because you said you think of other things. Memories come back when you look at the buildings. You think, oh yeah, there was that day that we did this, or there was that day when, oh yeah, gosh, I remember when Dad did this or Dad did that, or So so it brings back, it engenders good memories for you, and things that.
Very much so. And interesting, I have 2 grandkids that are in the other room doing homeschooling, well, online schooling at my house today, but they've both been involved with the train set. Logan has a corner, that's where he plays. My granddaughter has done lots and lots and lots of painting, put stuff together. So the train set for me has been an extension. They have learned about my life on the farm, and they ask questions. That's really been fun. Would I have built this train set without grandkids? I'm not sure, because it's given me a motivation to do something with them.
was going to say, it must also give you the opportunity to explain some things to the kids that maybe you wouldn't if you didn't have that, because you can say, oh yeah, you see this little house here? This is what we had for a toilet.
Right.
The old
Which is
outhouses.
real. Yeah.
For most of us that grew up on a farm, and we did for the first 5 or 6 years at least, had a outhouse. We didn't have indoor plumbing. We had water, but I understand you didn't even have running water in the house.
It's called Jimmy. Jimmy, go to the barn, get water. Yes, that's true.
Now, was there a pump out there, a well, or?
In the barn. At first it was a hand pump, but then we got an electric pump. I remember that. But we did not have running water in the house.
We talked about some of the things that you've done in the in your layout and how that was built and how that brings back memories. Are there still trains that you would like to own? Are there still engines or cars or things that you would say, gosh, I really wish I had one of those?
Yeah. So the question is, when is enough enough? One more. And I think that's where we all are. Times have changed. So when I go to drive to Oregon in the summertime, I see unit trains. What that means is that every engine, there's an engine, diesel engines of course, but it'll all be hopper cars, it'll all be tank cars, or all box cars. That's not the railroads that we typically run. They would have been mixed. So there's times when I'd like to have just tank cars, which would emulate today, but tank cars are expensive. So I probably will never have more than the 6 I have.
So it can get expensive.
Oh, yes,
You can't find yourself spending a lot of money on what should be a hobby on something you just.
And I'd say most of these guys have bought half of what they own is they've bought either at a swap meet or a lot of junk stuff. I have a couple cars that I took out of the junk. They're my favorite cars. Why? Because I put them back together. They were missing parts or whatever. But I'm new to this. I'm still learning how to do that. Engines? I don't know. I mean, I have the big boy, which is a real unusual engine. It's one of the biggest steam engines ever made.
We were talking earlier about the clubs and the number of different clubs, but when you want to join a club, well, maybe I should ask the question this way: how did you get to be a member of the railroad club in Balboa Park that you belong to? What did it take for you to be invited in, for you to be asked to join? I mean, did you have to? What did you have to do? Go through a secret ceremony, or
That's a really good question. I think even before you ask the question, how did you get started? The question probably is, so why would you want to do this? And my recommendation, if you think, yes, I think I'd like to do trains, I'd say get involved with a club first and find out whether or not this is something that you're going to be really interested in doing. It's rather tedious at times to make things work. So I went to this club and talked to the guys through the windows, quote unquote, until somebody said, "Do you want to see inside?" And then I was hooked once I went inside. So it was about that time then I bought my first cars. And I used to go down there and carry in an engine and 6 or 7 cars in a box, because that's all I had.
You basically have to have your own rolling stock in order to go down there and run them. You don't. There aren't just a whole bunch of trains sitting around and you get to go down. Now, you also, and I also want to bring in the other thing, was that you mentioned that you volunteer a certain number of hours. So is that a requirement, or is that just something you want to do because you get to run your trains down there on a heck of a large layout?
Well, the layout that we run on, it takes an hour and a half to go around. It's that, and that's at an average scale speed of about 20 miles an hour, but then you might get stuck in traffic, so you're on a siding for a while. Most of the guys that run this, we do 1 day a week. I have a couple of friends that are down there more than 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week. But I'm in 1 day a week, and that's my choice. So once you get started, you can do more than 1 day if you want to. but we're kind of a group. This Tuesday group I'm in.
Oh, okay.
We're friends and we tend to stay together.
Now, we were talking a little bit about your time at the Railroad Museum and what goes on there. So what would be a typical day when you go down, and how long do you stay, and what kind of things do you do?
So typically we were open from 10 to 4. So I would go down there somewhere around 8 o'clock, largely due to the fact that parking gets horrendous not too much long after that. So I go down, put my trains on the track, make sure all the couplers are working, make sure that the air hoses are not dragging on the track, everything's lined up. And then I go get coffee. And then somewhere right around 10 o'clock, we start driving trains, or running trains. We try and keep trains moving all of the time so that the people that paid to come in there get to see moving stuff. That's why they're there. I love interacting with those people. I'd rather talk to the people through there than anything else. And I love to bring people like you inside and say, do you want to see what it really looks like? See how much detail is in there. You can see some of the detail on my layout, a lot of that, because that's what I saw down there. So everything matters. The fact that my mother's out hanging clothes on the line on my layout is significant, because that's what I remember my mother doing.
In order to join the club, do you then have to have your own rolling stock?
Yes. Yeah, everybody brings their own, and I think largely due to the fact that you know that that's working. There are cars down there on the track, and you can hook up to them and pull them along if you want to, but that doesn't mean that the couplers all work. So we bring our own. You get invited in, and then pretty soon they'll say, okay, yeah, well, you're going to be back next week? Okay. And after a period of time, you are allowed to join the club. I pay $90 a year for the privilege of running my trains, which is pretty inexpensive. And the big step is getting your card so you can get in the door without having to knock on the door, or trying to get in a door there's a short way and a long way. I remember that day I got my card. It was a big deal to me, a big deal. So yes, you kind of get invited in and then you become part of that club. So the guys that I run with, we're friends. And we are still running down there because we're maintaining track.
Now, talking about the guys that are down there, what's the age range down there? Do you have young guys and older guys, or is this like like anything else? A lot of times it's when you get old enough that you have the time and the money, as you said earlier.
Right. A good question is, so what age group are people down there? I think it's kind of across the board, but because I'm there on Tuesdays, guess what? It's not going to be people that have jobs, typically. Once in a while, somebody will come in because they have a day off. I'm not the oldest in this group of 8 guys, but I'm not the oldest by about 6 months. Okay, so that group of guys that I'm running with are 50s and 60s and 70s, which is more typical. Okay. But I think that's been the case with a lot of it. And I'm concerned because, I don't know, can I get my grandson interested in this? I would hope so, because I have a lot of stuff. I would love to give him. But will he be interested? That's a question.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do that a lot. We think, oh yeah, well, my kids are going to want this. Right. And then your kids say, Dad, really? We don't want any of that stuff. What are we going to do with that? Right. For real railroads, what kind of things do you need to do, let's say even running your small layout here or taking your rolling stock down to the club to run it? What kind of things are you looking for and want to make sure that everything is good? Because if you're running on a huge, you said the layouts are huge, so you don't want to lose a track way over in Utah somewhere and not be able to get to it if it breaks down.
There's always things that need some adjustment or something need to be cleaned. We clean the track every week before we start, and I do that at my place too. I have a little track car that I push around. It looks like a piece of felt, sort of like the material they clean the track. You got to clean the wheels on the engines every so often. There's a special device that you set on the track itself, which gives energy, and the wheels will actually spin. It's a little brass like a wire brush that cleans your wheels. We talked about couplers. Not only are they locking like this, are they the same height? Because if they're not the same height, you go around a corner and they'll disconnect. What we call them air hoses or glad hands. The air hoses, if they're too low, they'll disconnect. They don't do that in real life because the air hose is actually a rubber hose that runs the steam to release the brakes on the train. It doesn't apply the brakes. It releases the brakes so you can move the engine or the car. So there's that kind of stuff. If you're going to have a problem, it will be in the tunnel. Trust me. 9 times out of 10, you typically don't have the issue. But when you are in plain sight, you look and you go, man, that car is really wobbly. I better pull it off before I get to a tunnel.
Now, you mentioned a big steam engine, and I know that there are different configurations for the wheels on an engine. Doesn't matter whether it's steam or...
Right.
And now, is there that kind of thing, that kind of configurations on an electric diesel, or are they all pretty much the same size?
Electric diesels are different from steam engines in how the wheels are set up. Okay, so I have the big boy, which has 2 axles up here. So it's a 4, 8 drivers, and then 4 wheels in the back. Those wheels are just balance wheels. This keeps it on the track. These are balance wheels for where the cab is. The drivers are actually where they're getting the energy from. The diesel engines typically they'll just have axles. The smaller ones will end up with like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you'll get them in so there be maybe 6 axles or 8 axles. There is a there isn't a diesel electric that we run. It's about this long, and it actually has 2 motors in it and 2 decoders. The decoder is what sends a message. All of our messages to run my train are sent through the rails itself with the computer. So when I push my go button, that message went from my machine through a computer, through the track, gets interpreted by a little box in the train engine itself to say go faster or go slower or make a sound. My big boy makes 29 different sounds, and no, I don't know how to use them all.
So, well, that's interesting. So it's actually transmitted through the track?
Through the track.
That says either puff out the steam or sound
whatever.
the horn or ring the bell or... Oh, wow. I always wondered how that worked. I thought, like I said, we had one, but it wasn't very sophisticated.
Right.
This is way back in the early 50s. And, you know, we were lucky to get it to go around. So,
and that only gave you power. And most of those were 3 rails. The center rail is where it got its power.
Okay.
So if it made a sound, it probably was mechanical more than it did come to the track. That's why we call it DCC. What you're talking about is what's called analog.
Do they ever change the layouts that you have, or are those fixed and nobody adds anything to them? They're like sacred and nobody touches them? Or can you does the club ever say, hey guys, we're going to redo the desert scene?
That's frustration. Right now we have a couple of sections of the railroad that are shut down because they're making some changes, and it's taken a while to make it work. Actually, the rails wore out, literally wore out. So they had to rebuild that section of the rail, and it's only about maybe 8 feet. I would expect that 8 feet is going to be somewhere in the area of 40 to 50 hours to rebuild that, to make it back like it was. So there's not a whole awful lot of changes, and if they do, it's maybe an area that might be maybe a yard long. Somebody just recreated a bridge down there that's awesome. You can't see it, unless you had a telephoto lens. You cannot see the detail till you get up close to it. And I saw the drawings that this guy had for this. It's amazing. I didn't draw pictures. He drew pictures to make sure that it matched. He went and measured the bridge to make sure that the piers matched the size. So yes, changing the layout is a major issue.
Okay, so we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I would like to get back to it, and that is the interest that you have And you've mentioned that your grandkids have done some work
Right.
on your layout, and they like to play around with the stuff that's out there. Is that part of what you hope will be part of your legacy, that you will be able to pass that on to your grandkids, either your granddaughter or your grandson, or both, or to have them?
Yeah. So what do I want to leave for my grandkids with railroading? I would like them to have a passion. Don't tell my wife, but I would love to take both my grandsons on a railroad ride. You know why I don't tell her? Because she'll plan it this afternoon. Okay. But yeah, that's something I would like to do. Will they do this when they're 16 or 18? Probably not. It'll probably be later in life when they would get more interested in this. Most homes don't have the space to build a layout. Just don't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I want to leave that. And I love it when my granddaughter comes out and says, "What do you need done today, Grandpa?" I have something else. I have a car that hangs up on a cliff as it goes by a cliff. So I'll go out there with a screwdriver and I'll make it bigger. And she comes in and does the fine touches and will paint it so it looks just like what it did before. So that's been fun to watch her be with that. Logan, who is only 8, he just runs his stuff all over the track. He's got, when I go out there, where their cars were, they're not there. Now they're someplace else. And Maddie, if she's here on Saturday, she puts all the cars at the church for Sunday. And I go out there Monday morning, I'm going, oh, there's no cars on my track. They're all here by the church. So that's been their input, and that's been fun.
You always like to think that your kids or your grandkids would
Right.
have something to remember Dad
Right.
or Granddad by, and that would certainly be something worthwhile that they could continue on and pass on down to their kids if it ever got
Right.
there. So
And it's part of the fantasy. The other grandpa, when I first started this, came over one day and said, "My grandkids cannot play on that playground until you get a fence over there because it's right next to the railroad tracks." Of course, it's, he's having fun with that. So how do you make a fence on a railroad? Well, window screens like this, what you do is you turn it sideways. Basically, it's fiberglass screen, but you're working on a real small scale.
thanks again, Jim, for your time and for allowing us to come into your home and see your layout and do that. Thank you for watching. We hope that you've enjoyed this interesting, for me at least, interview on railroading in the United States for miniature railroaders throughout the country and in Canada. And we thank you for watching Pace TV, and we hope you'll be back again soon.